Good evening, everyone. We have a quorum here right now, so we'll call to order the March 18th City Council work session for the City of Falls Church. We've got a very aggressive and lengthy agenda here, and I'd like to get us out of here by, let's try for 9:30, all right? So we'll first recognize the city manager for the first item, which is 301 West Broad Street, special exception application.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Snyder. The first item on the agenda, the 301 West Broad Street special exception application. The City Council last had a joint work session on this project on February 19th with the Planning Commission, and at that time the City Council heard about changes made to the project to move more of the massing of the building away from the adjacent property at Winter Hill and closer to Broad Street, and made other changes in response to initial concerns and questions and comments that they had heard in their interaction with the neighborhood. That interaction and engagement has continued with additional meetings. I think the developer has been very proactive in trying to address issues and work with the adjacent property owners. The staff recommendation tonight is that the council take action to refer this out to boards and commissions so that we can begin a more formal and more public comment and review period for this project. And in the draft motion that we've put before the City Council, it would call for comments to be back for the City Council's review for your work session on May 6th in time for potential action on May 13th. So that is the motion that we've recommended before the Council. We would like to provide just a quick overview from Mr. Fuller on the project. We're available to answer any questions on the fiscal impact or other aspects of the staff report. But let me ask Mr. Fuller to make that report. And Mr. Patrick Carney with Rushmark is here in the audience to answer any questions. We do not have planned to develop a presentation given the prior presentations that have been made to the City Council. And Mr. Greg Regal, counsel for Rushmark, is in the audience as well to answer any questions. Mr. Fuller.
Mainly for the benefit of the public, I know you guys just recently seen this, the joint work session. The Planning Commission did do a work session the following week to follow up on the February 19th work session. The developer has since met with the neighborhood and updated them in terms of the changes they made in their submission that they submitted at the end of January. And subsequently, they've also had a meeting last week where I think some representatives from Harris Teeter were up to talk about some operational issues with the neighborhood. So just as a recap on the project, the request here is for a special exception, and there's two of those. One for residential development to be in a mixed-use project, and secondly for a height bonus where in a B2 district, which is the existing district, 75 feet is allowed. They're asking for an additional 15 feet to 90 feet. The composition of the project, which totals about 372,000 square feet with a maximum height of 90 feet, would be a grocery store at approximately 60,000 square feet, additional commercial space at just under 3,500 square feet, and 282 apartments rental that would be on the stories above the first floor commercial. So at this time, staff's recommending that we go ahead and send this out to boards and commissions, refer that out so we can get it out for public comment. And we've scheduled a return for this item to come back in May. Planning Commission would have their public hearing on the middle of April, on April 15th. We have to advertise that according to law, and so there's a 3-week period to prep for that, as well as post the property, newspaper ads, and adjacent property owner notice to everybody within 150 feet of the property. That would occur for the April 15th meeting, and then there would be newspaper ads in support of your public hearing that would be scheduled in May. In this case, we're targeting May 13th. So I'll end my presentation tonight. If you have any questions.
Also, we just note I'm joined here to my right by Brian Williams, and he is representing the EDA. Chairman Novotny was not able to attend tonight's meeting, but glad to have you here as well.
Great, thanks Wyatt, and I apologize for being late. And the reason why we do have an EDA rep tonight, just so the public and council is aware, is because of the transactions that actually involve land that's owned by the Economic Development Authority. So a bit unusual, but we're very glad that we've got a rep here. And again, my apologies for being late. And before we get started, as I've previously disclosed, as a prudential matter, I own property at 243 Country Drive, and my wife is president of the Homeowners Association of Winter Hill. And I can consider these matters fairly and objectively and in the public interest. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Why don't we just go down the line with any questions or comments? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the process and timetable outlined by the manager and won't take any much time. When I came out of the EDC meeting on Friday and posted on my Facebook page that I was going to support what I hope the council would do tonight to get this thing out into the hands of the public sooner. I got a couple of questions back. I tried to list, the number of groups to which the council refers this, which is a long list. I think I missed a couple. Anyway, the question that arose from a couple of people was, to whom is this actually referred when we say we refer it out? Groups like the Chamber, VPAS, Environmental Services Council. I mean, is there a master list, or do we just kind of assume that when we refer something out for comment, all are welcome and all may receive materials if they ask?
In the draft motion, the specific organizations are listed. And so if council wants to add to that, you certainly can. Or if you want to broaden it to simply say, and others as appropriate, that would be okay as well. It's generally, these are the ones that report directly to the city council, and with the exception of the Chamber of Commerce and VPAS, but all the rest of them report directly to the council, and so they're named.
I'm sorry, does the resolution include the Environmental Services Council on?
It does.
Okay, thanks. That was a specific question. If you're confident that everybody who needs to be notified is, if there's nothing wrong with saying and others as appropriate, would that mean that if a group inquired, and I assume this means that they could get materials that they otherwise would not get unless they went to the library or whatever, is that?
Everybody is welcome to comment, and so that's the bottom line.
Okay, all right. Well, that's just the notice out to the public and Facebook land that everyone is welcome to comment, citizens, groups, everyone. And I look forward to hearing those comments and appreciate the work that the neighbors have done with the applicant. I think there's been a lot of good progress made. Groups that have already looked at it a little bit, EDA and Planning Commission. But I think this formal review process is going to be productive and public, and we've got a timeline that we all know, what we're trying to hit. So I support that. Thank you.
I'm going to be seeking to add the...
And others as appropriate?
Yeah.
I'll leave it up to you.
I think it may make sense just since you've been getting feedback. I don't think that's a problem.
I'd appreciate that. If we could add that language, if everybody's okay with that, I'd suggest that.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Callen?
I support moving the motion forward.
Vice Mayor Stoddard?
Thanks a lot. I wanted to put on the table some questions that have come from citizens. Particularly the Village Preservation and Improvement Society sent out a note on March 15th, which hasn't given anyone a lot of time to consider their questions before tonight. But I want to just review what some of them are so that you've got a sense about where I think this is one of the most effective citizens groups that we have in the city. I mean, they do a lot for the city, and so I think they've earned the ability to raise questions and do have some expertise in a number of the areas that they raise questions on. The first question is they wanted to clarify the economic analysis, and there they suggest that the true public service costs may be closer to $900,000 than $463,000. So I think the economic analysis needs to be looked at again to make sure that we're accurately capturing total student generation and the costs at about $14,000 per student for education. So And the city's model, I believe, needs to be updated. So before this process is concluded, I think we need a very, very closely scrubbed and updated economic analysis. The second thing they point out is the balance between commercial and residential. Again, it's 81% residential versus the commercial. So it's not the percentage that I think is ideal. And in fact, it's lower than some prior projects, although higher than others. They talk about reduced scaling, reduced impacts, the loom of the building they refer to. I think this relates to some of the neighborhood concerns. Broad streetscape, appropriate scaling, affordable housing units. They suggest there should be more. Environment, they suggest clarifying stormwater management, and they also talk about clarifying the LEED standard commitment. So I would ask that city staff and the developer pay close attention to these comments going forward, because in a way I think they encapsulate a number of the questions that we've been receiving from our citizens, and that the earlier we provide effective responses to all of these, the better I think it will be. I've pushed pretty hard on some of the questions that have come up, not only from the neighborhood, but from our citizens. And I believe at this point that if we didn't move forward, we could conceivably jeopardize the project. That we are competing with other jurisdictions for Harris Teeter. And I think there is a sense of urgency at this point. But that sense of urgency doesn't override legitimate questions from our citizens, both the immediate neighbors and the citizens generally, as well as refining the economics. So I'll be fully supportive. There are elements of this project that I really like, some things I'd like to change, but I think it's time to move it forward and engage more of the public. But I do think as we go forward, the earlier we resolve some of these things, the better and more smooth the process will go, so that we're not faced down the road with delays that could be costly for all concerned. So I want to thank all of our citizens for their input. I want to thank the neighborhood and the developer for a lot of meetings with the neighborhood. And I think we've made some progress in some of these areas, and I think we have some more to make before it comes back to us for formal approval. But I'm very, very hopeful that we'll all work out and that we'll have a great project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe.
Not a lot to add to what was already said. I'd support moving it forward at this point. It's interesting because, you know, one of the things you hear a lot of times with people who don't necessarily agree with things going on is you're not listening. And frankly, we've gotten a lot of feedback already before we've even referred it out for formal comments. So, you know, there's yet another round, and if anybody wants to get it in, there's some time to get more in, and we can hear it back, take the things into consideration, and make some decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Tarter?
Thank you. I also support moving this project forward. I think it's, as I said earlier, critical for the redevelopment of our downtown. I believe we need to create a vibrant, walkable commercial core, and I think this can be a central element to it. I think as you're going to hear later on tonight as well, we need to have a strong tax base in order to pay for schools, community services, and keep our tax rate at a reasonable level. And I think this is the kind of development we need to encourage and see more of in order to do those things. There certainly are improvements that can be made, but at some point you need to keep things moving forward, or if you wait for perfection, you end up getting nothing. So I think it is time to move this forward. I'd also recommend, as far as process goes, that we maybe try to get boards and commissions involved at in an earlier stage in the process. It seems right now, is this microphone working properly? I feel like there's a big echo going on here. I think we need to get boards and commissions involved at an earlier stage. At this point, we've had an awful lot of review of this project. A number of changes have been made, and it's just now going out to boards and commissions, which may have their own comments. And so I think for them to be fully integrated into the process, I think going forward or in the future, I think it'd be advisable to do this at an earlier stage. You know, at the end of the day, the city council may end up seeing this in one shape or the other 5, 6 times. And I have to say, in my experience in other jurisdictions, most decision-making bodies end up seeing a project like this maybe once or twice. So I think it would be in all of our best interest to make the process as streamlined as possible while encouraging full participation from the community and the neighbors. Again, I'm supportive of moving forward, and thank you very much.
I'll try to make some concluding comments, and then want to make sure that the EDA, if they have any comments, can make those as well. I think this project has certainly had some changes that are very helpful. So I'm also eager to have the process move forward and engage further public comment with our boards and commissions. So if there is a motion to move forward, I certainly would be supporting it. I think that there are real benefits to this project for the community as a whole. So I really do look forward to getting the board and commission feedback. I would just note that there are, for the council's benefit, and Mr. Shields, I'm sure you'll let me know if you would have covered these earlier, that there's some issues that we understand that the developer is still working on, such as a left-hand turn on Broad Street, which would really possibly help the overall flow of the project and actually, I think, actually make it more attractive so people are actually stopping here rather than just going down to other competitors, let's just say, down the block. Two is I believe the developer is still looking at some issues, and so is staff, regarding drive aisles in Annandale. I think the streetscape is still being reviewed, so I think if we can just make sure that the boards and commission process is taking a look at the streetscape and architectural issues. The VIPIS letter and others have touched on open space issues with the project, if we can keep the focus on that as well. And I won't repeat the VIPIS comments that Vice Mayor Snyder alluded to, but I do think they are one of the foremost bodies that are not directly city appointed, et cetera, that have provided helpful feedback. And finally, I think it was some of the architectural issues. So I think those are some issues that I had identified and others had commented on, and I believe staff is still looking at. And finally, I think one of the issues that VIPIS picks up on, which we haven't talked much about, is related to another matter we're going to be taking up later this evening, and that's stormwater management. So I don't think we've had much staff discussion about that, but it may be worthwhile to do that. And then as process, I think Mr. Tarter does make up a good point, and I believe that we're going to be discussing process issues about whether we want to handle SEs a little bit differently. I believe that Mr. Tarter is alluding to how Arlington does it, and they front load much of it. And I think that's for discussion that we should definitely have through the EDA is probably the best place to house that discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. From an EDA perspective, I just want to say that we are also eager to see this project move forward, so happy to hear the feedback from City Council. I also want to just share a general encouragement that we feel not only this project not only is important for short-term economic impact, but population density in our downtown area like this, we feel will be important to future projects that would encourage both retail and commercial development, which we all on the EDA agree are vital to the long-term financial success of the city. So we not only encourage the movement forward on this project, but also just want to express that an increase in population density there is a good thing from an economic perspective. So while we recognize there's some pushback in various areas, we don't think that advising a smaller project is necessarily advisable, again, from an economic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other parting shots? Okay, so we'll open it up for a motion and then go from there. And one thing that I believe staff had emailed us out about is while we would be contemplating taking formal action, at least for the target date of May 13th, after boards and commissions review, that we would hold a public comment. I believe that would be March 12th, but that wouldn't be for council action, so I don't think that the motion needs to change. But we do need to gauge council's feedback about whether that's something that they'd want to do. So if I can have a motion, then we'll have the vote. Mr. Cameron?
Read the whole,
Yeah, and I believe that Mr. Duncan had proposed adding some language.
move to refer TR 13-10, the Planning Commission, Architectural Advisory Board, Economic Development Authority, Housing Commission, Environmental Services Commission, Tree Commission, Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, Greater Falls Church Chamber of Commerce, Village Preservation and Improvement Society, and Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Astronomy Group of Falls Church City. I'm just kidding.
As Kathy would say, keep to the script.
I'm sorry, sorry. And what was the word language you wanted?
And others as appropriate.
And others as appropriate, to schedule a public hearing and council action for May 13th, 2013, and to advertise the same according to law.
Thank you. If I can get a second on the motion, please. Second. Is Mr. Tartar on the second?
And Cindy Mester will call the roll.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalen?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar?
Yes.
Ms. Berry's absent for the meeting. Mayor Brute?
Yes.
Passes as amended.
Thank you. And Ms. Berry is on work travel.
The astronomy comment, you don't have to put.
All right. So, council, before we wrap this up, my suggestion would be that we do hold a public comment hearing or public comment for the 27th. No council action on that date, but just advertise it for a hearing on the matter. Okay.
Okay.
April 27th.
I'm sorry. No, it would be March 27th.
Yeah,
We already
your
have
next
it.
meeting.
That's our, and again, for the benefit of the public, because of the Jewish holidays coming up next week, our regular next meeting is the 27th, which is Wednesday. So that's a week from this Wednesday. Okay. Why don't we plan on doing that?
Okay.
And that's also, I believe, we've got budget items that night as well.
That's
But we'll
right.
be getting to those next.
Could I urge one more thing, that in the interim, if the public and council is urged to provide written questions, if they have any, to the city manager for response. So we don't wait till the end of the process. We work through as many comments as we can as we go along. I think that'll help speed things at the end, and especially the VIPAS comments, which cover a wide range of topics, which I think you'll probably hear from other sources as well. So as soon as we can prepare comments and responses to that, I think it would help the process move along.
And yeah, just on that, rather than the city manager, it'd probably be most appropriate that they go to the city clerk. That way they're part of the public record, and the city clerk can make sure that they're distributed to council and other boards and commissions as appropriate. And I'm sure that we've got a website page up on this project now in our development section, which if we can just make sure that there's a link for comments to go to the right box, which I think is Kathy's city clerk box.
Okay. And we also have a one-pager on the schedule of all these board and commission meetings, and that'll be a helpful go-to place for people who are trying to track the progress of the project.
Mr. Kemp?
Thank you. Comment on the number of questions. A number of the things that were raised here tonight are old issues. These are not new issues. I don't know what to tell you in terms of what is it that we expect that's going to be new. We've asked people to review a number of these things numerous times. I saw the VIPAS questions. I mean, we're thorough as usual. It is a very highly valued community organization. They do great work. I have to tell you, though, I am yet to see a VIPAS report that didn't have many pages of suggested changes. I've yet to see a report where they said was pretty good as presented. So this is sort of within the normal scope of what we get from the groups. And I think we have to respond completely, but we have to do it within the time limits that we've set for ourselves. Thank you.
Other council members? All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Grab a chair. Thank you, Brian. All right, for the, next up is our sewer rate ordinance, and I would just note as we go into this part of the agenda, we have in rapid fire ordinance, we'll have the sewer ordinance, a stormwater utility ordinance, and then we will review the budget ordinance, the tax ordinance, and the CIP ordinance. All of those are scheduled for the agenda on Wednesday the 27th. Obviously, there's no action requested to council on these tonight, but we do want your comments on those, and so we can be as well prepared as possible for next Wednesday, March 27th. So we'll start off with the sewer rate ordinance, and I'll ask Brenda Creel to present this item.
Good evening, Council. You have before you for your consideration a proposal to increase our sewer commodity rates as well as our availability fees pursuant to our consultant's recommendations. We are proposing to increase the sewer commodity rate from $7.91 per thousand to $8.62 per thousand. This is an increase of about 9%. As you may recall, in 2011, we engaged the firm Municipal and Financial Services Group to evaluate our sewer charges. They recommended a 5-year financial plan and associated rate increases over a 5-year period. The council has adopted rate increases in FY12 and 13, and this would be the third in that series of 5-year increases. These additional revenues are needed in order to meet our debt obligations that are associated with the Arlington and Alexandria wastewater treatment plant upgrades that are required by EPA Chesapeake Bay recommendations. Some of the revenues will also be used to increase by a modest amount our sewer rehabilitation program and to continue funding recommended reserves. Secondly, we are proposing increases to our availability fees. We contracted in February of this year with the firm PJ Sun to evaluate these availability fees. These were last revised 5 years ago. These are fees that developers pay into our system along with new development. Our consultant had recommended fee increases in this area as well to ensure that we have adequate funding to purchase additional capacity over the next 5 years to meet demand that will arise as part of our development and redevelopment here in the city. Our consultant also recommended some minor tweaks to the methodology relative to hotel properties so that those are consistent with the way that we calculated these fees for commercial properties as well. So we are recommending at this time that you give first reading at your March 25th meeting, second reading and public hearing at April 22nd, meeting that coincides with your budget schedule. And Rodney Collins, our chief engineer, and I are available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brenda. Questions by council members?
Good question.
Mr. Duncan and then Mr. Tarter.
I'm sorry, I thought you were looking at Mr. Tarter. I'm looking at the fiscal, thank you. Looking at the fiscal impact line, I really only have one question. If you're a homeowner in an average assessed house, what's this mean in dollars and cents?
It's a 9% increase.
So, I'm sorry, last time I got my sewer bill, I did not memorize how much I paid, but I am.
We have an
Right,
average,
yeah. I mean, I am in an average assessed house, that's why I use myself as an example.
it's relative
Right,
to water.
but, you know, I'm also an average water user too, because everything I do is very average.
Phil, we'll forget you. said
We're
that.
calculating.
It's okay, I don't
I won't forget
I'm
that.
proud to be average.
Well,
I represent the average taxpayer. So, yeah, I'm just trying to add all these things up that we're talking about tonight and come up with a grand total, if that's possible.
Well, while we're doing that,
Well,
why
we're
don't-
calculating. We'll,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was so hard.
why don't we
We've
turn-
had this number, when this has come before the council in the prior years, I think we've done that calculation on a quarterly bill, and, $27 per quarter.
per quarter.
Okay, so,
That's the total bill.
Yeah, compared to a 22,
so
compared to a $23 bill,
So
$27.
$4 a quarter, basically, $16 a year. Okay, thanks.
Wait,
Thank you, Ron.
that sounds a little low.
Yeah, that's.
Let us
Maybe-
confirm that.
Maybe it's not okay.
Why
Okay.
don't we do this?
By the
Why-
time we come back, maybe
Why
we
don't,
can have
why don't
that.
we have this come back as an issue? Mr. Tartar?
That was where I was going. To me, it's relevant what the current amount is now and then how much more it'll be. So I think it's relevant information, and I'd like to know the answer whenever you guys are able to provide it.
And I think we've done it based on various sort of a range, because it's going to, again, as Mr. Kalen mentioned, it's based on water usage. Other questions? Okay. So the one item on this then is to get a range of what the increase means to various types of users.
We did it on water.
I have
Sure we
one
did
last question, if I could.
sewer before.
Please, and again, I think it's important not to just focus on residential, because some of the commercial properties are going to be affected. So let's just try to get the range to the extent that we can. Mr. Tartar?
When was the last rate increase?
The last year,
Last year. And what was that? What percentage was that approximately?
about 9%.
Okay, why are they going up, significantly more than the rate of inflation?
Again, this is relative to the treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant improvements in both Arlington and Alexandria. And those costs are significant, and that's the major driver behind these rate increases. And we see this across the region as we respond to the EPA regulations.
So Arlington is raising our rates basically 9% or thereabouts?
It's relevant to both the Arlington treatment plant costs and then again on the Alexandria side, yeah.
But collectively, they're raising our prices, our sort of wholesale prices, about 9% as well?
It's the debt associated with those projects.
Yeah, when Arlington, the 4 Mile Run plant and Alexandria both have done, I think the 4 Mile Run plant had a $500 million capital plant upgrade, and we're responsible for just over 1% over that. And when that happened, basically everybody had upward pressure on their rates, and so all around the region, everyone's sewer rates are going up in Fairfax County and Arlington County. And we deferred rate increases for 6 years, and we were actually burning cash in the sewer fund to meet this debt service obligation. So when we did our rate study, we put together a financial plan to get back to cash flow, get back to break even, and we're still in that process. And so these rate increases are necessary to meet these obligations we've already met.
I'm sorry, could you mind if I ask another question or two? I'm not totally conversant on all this. So is this a part of the city, a subset of the city, in other words, its own sort of fund, or is it?
Yeah, it's a standalone fund.
A standalone fund. And so if we had, for a period of years, we weren't really collecting as much as we should have?
That's correct.
Why were we doing that?
That's a good question. We shouldn't have been doing that, but I will say this, as we were taking on these, with Fairfax County and Arlington, they were moving forward with their projects. We were there at the table, being briefed on these projects, and the debt came online basically 1 year ahead of us beginning the financial plan to raise the rates to get them back up to where they need to be.
Do we have like a governing document for the sewer fund that sort of says, hey, we got to balance the books every year, or, income has to equal? Do we have anything like that? In other words, so that situation doesn't happen where we end up having, spikes in, rate increases due to failing to collect as much as we may have should have?
If you develop a financial plan and you stick to it, then you don't play catch-up. We're playing catch-up.
I guess the question is, though, we're not going to be doing that in the future. We have a plan that's going to go forward.
As long as we stick to these rate increases as prescribed by our consultant, yes.
And that study was done when, Richard? That was done in the last.
2011.
2011.
So we're in the
Last
third
year.
year of it.
And we're in the third year of a 5-year plan.
And that document may be helpful to get around to council again. Because we do have, I know that some of the council members who were on last have seen it in various contexts, but I don't believe the new council members have seen it, so if we can make sure that goes around again. Anything else?
No,
Okay.
that's it, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Ready to put this on the calendar for the 27th? Okay. Let's go ahead and place it on the calendar for the 27th.
All right, thank you, council. We'll have in the staff report the impact.
Thank you.
So for the stormwater utility, we have before council a draft ordinance that would establish a stormwater utility fund and establish the administrative procedures associated with that fund. And I'll ask Mr. Hicks to provide a summary of some of the key aspects of the ordinance and how that fund would operate.
Good evening, council. Thank you for your time this evening. I'll try to be very brief. We have talked about the potential for creating a stormwater ordinance. If you do that, you need a stormwater utility. If you do that, you need an ordinance that establishes that stormwater utility. This is what is before you tonight with the request that it go out for first reading on the 27th of March. In this ordinance, there are 4 things. It establishes an enterprise fund dedicated to stormwater expenditures. It creates a mechanism for credits. We've certainly heard folks asking for the potential to do good things on their own properties that would reduce their fee. This creates the mechanism to do that. It would create the mechanism to generate revenue based on impervious cover on your lot. This ordinance doesn't have the actual rate in there, but we have been working on a $19.80 per 200 square foot impervious area. That setting that rate would be part of the budget process that we would get to, we would work through in April as the stormwater budget comes before you for your review. And then it defines the billing practice as associated with the real estate bill coming out twice a year. Since this went out in your packet last week, we received several comments, and I want to try and address several of those tonight just so we can begin that dialogue. One of those is, how would you determine the impervious cover on each lot? And we would do that based on our GIS information. And the question is that accurate enough? Part of the work that we had AMEC do through this process was to figure out what obstacles we had before us. And they absolutely looked at our GIS information, our graphical information, our mapping system. And our system as it exists today is very accurate to that 200 square foot level. It's actually probably closer to a 100 square foot level that we could parse down. So it's more accurate than we really need. For other reasons, we're not trying to delve down that tightly. But our GIS information is accurate enough to do this work. The question came up, can we distinguish between a deck and a building or a sidewalk? And the answer is absolutely, we can do that. A question came up in public hearing whether or not, at the Stormwater Forum, I believe, whether or not we would be charging ourselves. Specifically through this ordinance, we would not be charging ourselves. We would not be moving monies from one pocket to the next. State authorization specifically allows a locality not to charge themselves. The credit policy is not defined here. We absolutely need to get to a place where we have a defined credit policy. We have tasked AMEC to go out and investigate the technical merits. This is not hard to do. There's a lot of go-bys that are in the industry, and we want to work that through. I think the question is where do we want to go to get our buy-in? Do we want to stand up the previous Watershed Advisory Committee? Do we want to stand up another committee? Do we want to have is it this body that buys into what that credit policy is? But we absolutely need to get to a place where we have a credit policy and everybody is on the same page about that. I think the last area of concern that we've heard is whether there should be an appeals process. Certainly in the ordinance that's before you, the request for adjustment, if you find an error in your building or you don't agree with how much impervious cover, all of that goes to the Director of Public Works, and the final determination is there. That is common. It is very much how it's done in stormwater industry. And if you also look at how your water bill or your sewer bill is prepared, there's not really an appeal process beyond that authority. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't make this any more complicated than we can make it. The items for appeal start on line 174, and it's really narrowly defined. Talks about did we make an error, a computational error? Did we make a map reading error? Have we identified a parcel owner incorrectly? Did we apply a credit improperly or not apply that credit? There's really a narrow area available for adjustment. So we could, if it is deemed by this body to find another, if we want to go beyond the director to appeal those few items, then that's certainly fine with us. If you want to appoint a citizen board to do that, that's certainly under your purview. It would be a little more unique, I think, for these narrowly defined items of adjustment. But we would certainly leave that in your hands. I am here to take any questions tonight, and we'd like to have it on your schedule for the 27th.
Council questions? Vice Mayor Snyder?
Thanks very much. We received a note from 3 of our citizens that raised the appeal procedure, the staffing, and the standards and transparency. And while I don't particularly need answers on all of these tonight, I would like to see responses and an opportunity to dialogue so that I can forward these responses back to the citizens who raised the questions, and if they have further questions, they'll be able to do that. Specifically, that's the note from Linda Neighborgall, Hal Morgan, and Dennis Szymanski, many of whom have been very much involved in this process from the beginning. So I would appreciate responses to each of the issues that they raise so that we can communicate with them and see if they have any follow-up questions. Second issue I want to underscore is the importance of the ability to do certain things to reduce your exposure to this fee. I think this is one of the real positive public policies behind this. I know there's a lot of community support for this element of it, so hopefully we'll be able to get some specificity before we have to vote on this as to the kinds of things that we're talking about. Because I would like to make the case to the community that it's not just a tax, but rather there is an opportunity to do certain things that actually get at the underlying problem, not just simply pay to manage it, if you will. So I think that's very important to the ultimate acceptance on the part of the community. So I would hope we'd have some more specifics by the time we take action on this.
Yes, sir, we agree.
If I can just ask a follow-up on that, and then Ira will go to you. This relates to the timing issue. I just want to get from staff a sense of, right now, section 42-246, which is at line 121, basically just says the credits, which are one of the advantages of having this enterprise fund, essentially will be determined via resolution at some future time. Two things that I think the comments point to is, one, we don't ever define when the time is, and I think that goes to Vice Mayor Snyder's point. can we do that if it's by resolution by April 22nd, which is when we would take final action? Or do we anticipate that more time is going to be needed?
I want to say yes. I do need to go back and talk with AMEC, but I think that it is possible to get to that point. I think we're going to have a lot to be able to present to you very quickly. I think it seems reasonable that this could go along with the budget process without problem.
But one thing I think we should speak to it just a little bit tonight, just so make sure we're all on the same page, because I think what is envisioned, we currently have BMPs that are installed by commercial or residential property owners, and they typically are pretty formal in that they have an agreement with the city so that we can be sure that it's going to be maintained properly and then it will have a permanent benefit. And so that's not your average rain barrel at a downspout. It's more involved than that. And so since I think this has come up as a key point, I think we ought to have some dialogue on that just to make sure we're on the same page as to what the expectations are. Could you speak to a little bit more as to what you think that the credit program would look like?
I don't want to say that rain barrels are not part of the solution, and I'm not going to say that they're not part of the credit policy, but I will say that when you talk about stormwater management, rain barrels hold at best 55 gallons of water, and we are talking, you know, we measure this water in cubic feet per second, which is, you know, 7.48 gallons every second, which a 55-gallon drum fills up very quickly. And so the rain barrels, the very small things, the things that are very temporary that don't get managed all that well, we're going to have to look very closely at, is it worth it to provide credit? Now, we have best management practices in place that are managed, and we have a lot of them on our commercial properties. We have some here on City Hall. Those exist with a, we call it a best management agreement, a BMP agreement that's recorded with the deed. It's filed with the city, and there's an obligation for both how they're used so that we know that they're emptied when they need to be emptied, so they're ready to take that first flush, and they're maintained so that they're cleaned out on an annual basis and they're inspected. That is one end of the spectrum. The rain barrels are another end of the spectrum, and our policy needs to figure out what is going to be palatable and what is not.
I think Mr. Kalin is going to come out of his seat if we don't call on him next. Mr. Kalin.
I've spoken to two of the three people that Mr. Snyder has referred to, and they've been very diligent in their work and what they want. Two of the three, I can speak to Mr. Morgan, but certainly agree that it should be taken out of the general fund, taken as a separate enterprise. There's no question about that, and they also agree that it should be a fee. What they're concerned about, and what the issue I think that underlies this, is people seem to be reluctant to mention it. It's never been my problem, is there's a question of trust. They just don't have trust that it's going to be administered in a way that's equitable and represents certain fairness. I won't go into why or how, but that's, I'm reporting how many other people have that feeling, I don't know. But it clearly is part of the legacy of previous administrations and so forth, especially as it relates to stormwater and previous promises to take care of it. That having been said, perhaps an idea would be, in terms of the GIS accuracy, if you could do a sample, even asking for people who like to have a sample analysis, sample of 10 houses or 15, whatever, and do your GIS study and then ask if they agree, and then you'll compare it, come by and actually compare what the GIS would have estimated as to what the site actually has. And if you do that on a random, well, it doesn't have to be statistically significant because that would require over 30 houses, but if you could do something that is random enough, that would help, I think, alleviate some of the concern about the accuracy of the GIS system without incurring a lot of extra cost. As to the appeals procedures and the other things that have been mentioned, to the extent you can be more specific, that clearly would be helpful, because, but what you're facing is an issue of trust and confidence. Thank you.
Other council members? Mr. Pepe?
Well, the other thing to point out, and nobody's really noted this, a lot of this is controlled by the Code of Virginia, and we can only act within what it allows us to do. So, for example, in the reductions, it clearly states a waiver can be granted for a permanent reduction in stormwater and load. So we're going to have to do something within those guidelines. As much as people would like to do something at the small end that says do a few minor things, you may have a hard time arguing a few rain barrels constitutes a permanent reduction of water flow. And I assume that also subsumes there has to be some mechanism to make sure permanent means permanent, whether it's through checkups or follow-ups, as well as a lot of the other provisions that are in here regarding transparency and rate setting and everything else. There's some very detailed provisions in the state code that, and I noticed there is a cross-reference there, but people probably ought to go check that out if they want to see the parameters we're working with.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe. Mr. Tarter?
A few comments. At a previous meeting, I had mentioned having a plan to essentially address the known flooding areas in the city. I don't believe I've seen that yet. Is there something underway to really kind of have a long-term plan of how we're going to address the areas we already know are causing problems in our city?
So, I went back and looked at our watershed management. I went back and looked at our watershed management plan, and I believe, and the full range of all the projects that are in there, I think we're about less than $12 million, and I think it was closer to about $10 million. So. This utility, it does really three things. It enhances the operating budget. It puts $1 million towards conveyance, rehabilitation, and replacement, and $1 million towards water quality every year. So with that in place, that watershed management plan, we would be able to tackle all of those projects that are in that watershed management plan in 10 years. And we had always envisioned that that was a 10-year plan that would evolve, and we would look very hard at the end of the 10 years. We're certainly going to look very hard at year 5 and see how it's evolving. But at the end of the 10-year life of that plan, we need to have a new plan in place.
So just to summarize, at least for my own edification, essentially what's already been identified as problem areas, we have a general idea of the cost to address those problem areas. And you believe 10 years of funding as sort of planned at this point would be sufficient amount of time for the city to upgrade facilities as needed to alleviate the flooding in the areas we already know about today?
As documented in the watershed management plan, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I think that's important for people to support this plan and to support what is essentially a tax, at least in my mind, to know that there is a concrete proposal to get things done. And I think we ought to make a commitment, as much as we can in paper and writing to say this is what we're going to do and this is our time frame to do it. Subject to, obviously, things may change over time, but to give the people of this city a commitment for what they're paying for, that we're going to solve some problems and not create a bureaucracy without having concrete goals to do. So I would strongly recommend that we try to document and put in writing as much as we can what our goals are and how we intend to achieve them. But that's good to hear that there's essentially a 10-year plan to resolve these issues. Question or two, what property, obviously you just told us city property is going to be exempt. What other property is exempt? For example, homeowners association, common area, what property is exempt within the city? And I apologize if it's on some page of this report. Apparently it is. I see you flipping around.
It is, and it is on line 96, federal or state or local government or public entity, that's us, so that would not be charged. Public roads, streets, and right-of-ways, they would not be charged. And then cemeteries, as long as the cemetery had a nutrient and pest management plan.
So nothing else. For example, homeowners associations would be paying any other facility in this, anything not exempt in this, pursuant to state law, we're not proposing to make exempt under our own ordinance.
Exactly right.
Okay. With respect to the appeal issue, I guess I would weigh in as well to suggest that I think it probably is appropriate to have some sort of higher appeal. I professionally handle appeals occasionally. And I would say, even just looking at the list of things, I don't really like the idea of limiting the list of things you can appeal because, for example, I was just thinking you could characterize something as impervious when in fact someone else may say, no, this is grasscrete. This is actually not impervious surface, and that could be a point of dispute. and I'm not sure I see that in the list. Maybe you could sort of say, well, it falls into this or that. But I would prefer a catch-all here as well to say, look, if there's anything else you got as an issue, you're free to bring it up, and you get your due process. You get your day, not in court per se, but I think we ought to have a little bit broader range of appeal and a broader right to appeal to a higher body. That's just my 2 cents. Let me take a look. I think we also, we need to recognize this is a tax, and, we're going to be having a discussion later on today about tax rates. I think this sort of has to come in the mix as well. And I know we don't have a rate or a number for it yet, but I think at the end of the day, this is going to affect homeowners in this city or any business in this city, and so we have to be cognizant of that. I think we also need to be cognizant this is going to hit businesses sometimes harder than it's going to hit residents, because most of those have impervious surface, and some of those have upgraded to higher, BMP treatment and the like, and so they're sort of being hit twice in the sense they've already paid for the upgraded water treatment through recent proposals or recent development, yet they're still going to be hit with this tax or the fund. So anyway, that's what I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Other council members, Mr. Kelly?
Dave, in terms of a catch-all, I understand your desire for making sure that the appeals are as needed, but there's, in a litigious society, I think some limits need to be put in. Otherwise, we can get a lot of frivolous claims, and we could be spending a lot of time on discussions that needn't take place. So there's a fine line there between keeping it open and inviting people who may be bored and need other forms of entertainment to come in and complain. So I know you're in the legal world, and these things are interesting. By all means, Dave, go ahead.
I would just say I think it's due process. It's not just interesting, but it's people's right to basically have their day in court or wherever it might be. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, Ira. I think that people should have a right to appeal if they feel like it's something.
Well, let's try to.
May I step in, Mr. Mayor, and break up the?
Yeah, I'm gonna
change
try to break this up a little bit. All right.
Could I,
Mr. Duncan?
could I speak to the?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I thought I was doing a favor.
As long as you don't join the choir.
No, I'm not jumping into that. No, but I am pleased to hear the range of concerns because I think they are good questions. It's normally me that traffics in words like hopefully and strongly encourage and so forth, but I must say I have more than a vague sense of unease that we are, 5 weeks away from creating what I see as it's a new line of business here. It's a stormwater utility, apparatus. And some pretty fundamental questions, to me, seem unanswered. I know much work has gone into this, and there's hardly a more important thing that we talk about than trying to keep, floodwaters and sewage out of people's basements. I really cannot think of a more important topic. Right off the top of my head, one time my basement flooded, and it was a memorable event in my family's history. But some of the questions that have been raised and some of the answers given tonight are sort of news to me. I thought that there, naively, was going to be some sort of a mechanism for reducing, exposure to this fee that the average homeowner could avail him or herself of. To me, a user fee is something that if I use it, I pay for it, and I get that. But this isn't really any kind of a fee if I don't have some means to spare myself some portion of it, and that's a concern that I have that I look forward to hearing. What Mr. Pepe says is basically it's against the law to do what I thought we might be doing, what I thought the environmental services groups were hoping that we would do, which was encourage people to do rain gardens and rain barrels and so forth. The conservation element of this was important. At any rate, that point's made, I suppose, but I'm not like hopefully we can do better on that. If we can't do better on that, I think we just have to be honest with the people and tell them this is a tax, and the rain falls and you're going to pay a tax for it, and be very transparent about it, and not try to sell this as something that it isn't. The other thing that concerns me, and I appreciate Mr. Tarter's question, is that if we have $10 million worth of needs and we're going to take 10 years to get around to them, it does concern me that in the early years that we're going to be pouring money into this fund, and the people whose projects are in years 8 and 9 are not going to be seeing the benefit of it. And I think that's going to be a public relations disaster for the city that we should think about. I mean, that's a concern that I would have. The other two things, I guess, that concern me, one's, I think, a pretty easy question that Mr. Hicks can answer. At the presentation on Saturday, there was a review of our effort in this area in previous years, and it was, C at best, D, F. We have not been doing our work, is the message I take away from that. And then another part of the presentation, when we're talking about reduced flood insurance coverage that certain people in the city get, we actually rate very nicely. We get a 15% reduction, homeowners can. And I think just as a messaging matter, if we've been doing poorly, then people can reasonably ask, why are we able to get a market-leading discount on our flood insurance? Now, I think maybe that's an apples and oranges thing, but in terms of messaging, I think it's important to try to explain that. And finally, it does concern me that the people who are asking the most pointed questions, and maybe they can all be answered, as Mr. Snyder pointed out, are Mr. Zemansky, who served on the Watershed Management Committee and has concerns that you can read and address when we bring this before the meeting, and Ms. Nabergall, who lives over on Hillwood Avenue, which, as I understand it, is one of the areas that is most affected. So I take those not as just two average citizens, but as pretty serious concerns. So in sum, I don't want to prejudge, but given the short amount of time that we have between now and when we're going to have to pass this, April 22nd, it seems to me like there's quite a lot of work left to do before we can go to the citizens with a plan that, I would say as a baseline gives some credit for mitigation techniques, however minor they might be, if for no other reason than to send a kind of message that the city values that. And then the larger questions, of course, that I've raised, I would hope that we can answer. So thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
Phil, in terms of the issue of some people waiting 10 years, this is the council that asked that the original request be cut. So if it's going to take that extra time, we were the ones that requested that situation be developed. So we have to take some responsibility for our own actions on this. I think Mr. Hicks and Mr. Shields were responding to council requests about how to reduce the initial cost of this particular program. Also, the more, if we're worried about funding, the more minute we get in credits, or the more we allow. And Dave, please, I'm not saying that shouldn't be due process. I'm just saying that it should be within certain bounds. That's all. Please don't mischaracterize that. The more it costs, okay? If you're going to spend a lot of time with appeals, if you have to spend a lot of staff time going out and checking to see if a 25-gallon rain barrel really is making a difference or not, this is all going to run up the cost. So you always have these types of issues. And again, I've spoken to Linda and Dennis at length about this on the technical issues. I've written about the technical issues with them, and they support the idea of an enterprise fund and the fees. Now, I understand what Dave means by a tax, because at the end of the day, it's an additional expense over and above your real estate tax, but I would prefer that we continue to use the word fee. You don't say your electric bill is part of your tax. You don't say that your gas bill is part of your tax. This is a fee.
But if I could, the difference that you're distinguishing there is my electric and gas bill actually can conserve electricity and gas usage, and as I understand it, there's not going to be a way for me to mitigate. So on that specific point, it is what it is. People can call it what they want, but that does raise another question in my mind, if I might. If we have $10 million worth of needs, what is the cost if we bonded $10 million in stormwater improvements and prosecuted that campaign over a shorter period of time? That would be could be still funded through a stormwater enterprise fund, but the costs associated with doing the work and the costs associated with setting up a mechanism to GIS everybody and, deal with appeals and so forth. I mean, there's some administrative costs involved in that, and I guess it would be helpful to know if we have $10 million worth of needs, why would we take 10 years to do them if there is a way to bond at today's fairly low rates and do that work more quickly?
Bonding is easy. How are you going to staff it? Increase cost. Are you prepared to go over 1.7? That's all it is.
I remember last year about this time, Bill was asked, if we threw more money, we council, I wasn't on council then, but if council threw more money at you, could you do more work? And the answer was, no, I don't have the people to do it. So I understand that there's costs associated with, a stepped up effort, but is it, 10 years worth of costs? I mean, in other words, is there a way to design a plan that gets the work done in 5 years, 6 years? Again, my concern is that everybody's going to be paying into this, and the people who are having severe flooding problems, as identified by this list, we're not going to get around to them until year 7, 8, or 9, and that's just a long time, right?
Well, I think that you're going to have to give staff a little credit for being able to determine what projects are going to be first. So I think they'll be prioritized in such a way that they address the major issues. We can debate, whether Hillwood needs it more than, some other neighborhood, but that's what the engineers are going to work out.
We did go through the watershed management planning process with a citizen-led group that the city council, they adopted that plan. And in that plan, we vetted this list of projects, and we came out with the highest priority projects were up at the top. And those we're going to tackle in 5 years. It's the lower priority projects that are in those 5 out years. I'll also tell you that we talk to other jurisdictions. I mean, we certainly coordinate with those folks. And one of the things, even today, I had a conversation with one of the stormwater managers in Arlington County, and one of the things that they really are struggling with is that they were able to raise their monies to bond big projects that they do not have the staff to execute in a way that they need to. And we really, as we worked since October, presenting you with the a cost model, we really worked to try and find the sweet spot about what that would ultimately end up in a rate model, and that was really half of where we started. So it really does, as Mr. LeCondre said, come down to money. Another area I'd like to speak is I just want to be clear. There is without question going to be a credit policy that we absolutely have to have in place. The rate model that we've developed sets aside $92,000. I believe that's the right number, and I may be off a couple $1,000s, but it's a substantial amount of money in that to credit folks who do these things on their properties. Now, there are commercial developers who've already done them. They have that long-term thing in place. But if you are a homeowner, you also, if you've built a new home in the last few years, you've had to do that too, and you have one of those BMPs in place. And if you, on your particular property, want to build a rain garden, that is truly going to be one of those accepted practices. But you would have to have a BMP agreement in place that says this is a permanent best management practice, but it's something that you could absolutely do on your property that would give you credit. The second way to give you credit is that if your impervious cover reduces from what it is today, that's part of the fee you're not paying for. It's just like if you didn't use electricity, you don't use that impervious cover, the rate stays the same, but the amount you pay goes down because it's based on that 200 square foot unit. If you have less billing units, we charge you less.
Other council members? Vice Mayor Snyder?
Just very quickly, if I recall the discussion about how we got here on Saturday, I think it was pitched in a different way than was characterized earlier. I think a couple things that have occurred that have really changed. The first is the climate issues, and Tropical Storm Lee exposed a change in the severity of weather and the frequency of severe weather. And the second thing are these Chesapeake Bay requirements. The city had funded stormwater work in the past, and as far as I know, the city council would already always approve the recommendations that were provided to us. But there were some game changers here, and they've created a need that will go out into the future, and we're moving to address that need. As I recall, that was your presentation on Saturday.
And I think that's absolutely right. I'll just anecdotally, I remember in 2003 when we were having the floodplain map discussion, the storm that everyone referred to in 2003 was still the 1972 Hurricane Agnes. I mean, that's what people would say. I remember when that storm came through. Well, we've had 3 Hurricane Agneses since 2003. So that's, I think, a point that reinforces what you're saying.
Mr. Callen?
But just to round that out a little bit, when we had the years when we had serious financial stress, I believe one year we had no capital improvement projects go forward at all, 0. So there were basically, even though we had approved it earlier on, when it came to the actual budget, because of budgetary exigencies, we provided no funding for a couple years. And this is a point I've made a number of times. When we do that, we're effectively having the people who suffer water in their basements pick up the cost for projects we didn't do, and they pick it up in the form of damages and other expenses because the stormwater wasn't adequately controlled. So we've been actually passing on expenses to a smaller group of people by not being able to fund the capital improvement projects. This way, they will be a dedicated fund, and it will not be subject to the city's financial vagaries of whether we need to cut the CIP or not. There will be funding to make sure that people like yourself who have flooding issues from time to time will be protected. I'm the president of my HOA, which is much smaller than, and we don't have any flooding problems. I've never had a flooding problem, but I would certainly support the most rapid implementation of this as possible, and I would certainly be recommending to our members that we be more than willing to support whatever is required for the city in order to control the stormwater issue. Thank you.
All right, let me,
Can I just ask one more specific question? The people, thank you, who are, the entities that will be exempt from this fee are pretty limited, as I understand what you're saying. So religious institutions, nonprofits, they would all pay into this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and as I understand it, it's supposed to be billed on the property tax bill. Do groups like that receive a property tax bill, or is that then going to be?
No, they don't.
Oh, okay, well.
Jesus, come on.
So since they don't receive a property tax bill, then you'll be doing an individual separate mailing to any groups to capture their fees.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
all right, let me try to pave a way forward. If you forget the pun, glad Johanna's not here to correct some.
You're permitted.
some faux pas I'm making, but certainly I'm very committed to doing this via an enterprise fund, as Mr. Callen mentioned. I think certainly a segment of our community is as well. And I'll have to say I've been, I've had my foot to the metal on this one. But I do want to make sure that we're doing this thoughtfully and engaging our citizens in making the appropriate information available in a manner that our citizens can digest and understand. Because it is a different way of doing business. Certainly we've got our infrastructure that needs improvements, but also the mandates that we're getting from the state as well that need to be managed. And I don't want to, we're going to have one shot at this. If we don't do the public outreach and engagement, and if we don't have buy-in from the community, I don't want to replay the PED plan. Let's be honest about it. We need to make sure that we're engaging the public at large. My sense is that the engagement with the business community and religious institutions needs to happen very rapidly. And I've certainly discussed this with the manager. The manager fully appreciates it, and he's free to comment on it. And I'll share with council members, I've encouraged Mr. Shields, given the timing of this, not to take it all just on his own. I think we're going to need staff help. I'm glad that we've got representatives from the Environmental Services Council. We're going to need their assistance in doing the outreach. It's an important issue. It's a moral issue, one that I'm committed to doing, but we need to make sure the public engagement with our religious institutions, with our residences and citizens, and also with our businesses happen on this item. And then we have the level of detail that we were going into here. I think it's going to be really important to. There's been a lot of work certainly done on the stormwater task force. I was a member. I was the council liaison to that. But making sure that people are aware of that document. I think people forget that work has been done. So every time we talk about this type of ordinance, it needs to be there, and there needs to be a summary of here's where we've been, so it doesn't feel like we're doing something new. It's very much inside baseball, but for us, we all know it's been done, but it goes to the public messaging and the public process. And then 4 is some appeals process that's streamlined. Again, I think we're going to have to look at what other jurisdictions who have an enterprise fund like this do. I think the due process issues are important, but I don't think we've got an extremely robust system for for sewer and sanitation as far as how that's appealed. This is a little bit different because we're talking about credits, etc. So we may need to come up with a hybrid, but I'd be interested in finding out, other jurisdictions are doing this work. Northern Virginia seems to not handle it this way. Other jurisdictions through the country seem to be handling it through an enterprise fund. So I think we could benefit from how they've handled it. Just to get a sense of, what are they doing? If they do have a robust appeals process, then we may need to reevaluate where we're headed and vice versa. So I think it's getting some rough metrics around those points would be important. So I think what I'm getting to is the following 4 items that are pretty broad. What is the public engagement process? This has certainly been on the minds of certain segments of the community and the residents of Falls Church, but the business community, I believe that outreach has started. I don't think that the outreach with our religious institutions and other non-exempt organizations has started, and certainly this would have an impact on them. 2 is enlisting the service of our fine citizens who work on these issues, like the Environmental Services Council, possibly members of the Watershed Task Force if they're so inclined. I don't believe that's an active group right now, to help with some of that outreach efforts and also the public engagement process. And then a way of linking this type of work that we're doing on the ordinance and the planning of projects and how they all fit in with the work that's already been done in a way that's digestible in the staff report, so it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere without any work, which we know has gone into this. And then the 4th item is the look at appeals issues and how other jurisdictions are handling it. But to Mr. Kalen's point, and I think Mr. Duncan also alluded to it, this is a bit of trust. I think that we need to do some work on that front. So those are the four sort of loose items that I see. So I wanted to gauge other council members and get their thinking about that.
Mr. Mayor, I think the credits program is another area of refinement that we'll need to do.
I'm sorry, and I should have had that down in my notes. Thank you for mentioning that. And I think staff is going to get back to us about whether they think they can have the credits in time with this. Otherwise, one proposal may be that we have a date certain by which an ordinance would come forward before this becomes effective. Some legislative folks do that, just down a few miles. That may be one approach, to say by a date certain before this is effective, the council has to approve the resolutions dealing with, you know, the credits. So it's a delayed effective date that's tied with it. That again, I'm totally brainstorming here after receiving comments and reading them, half an hour ago. But that may be one legislative knot that we can draw. But again, I don't want to lose some of the momentum, but I don't want to be so put to the metal that we're not getting this right, because we're going to have one shot at this. So, and I think we all want to do the right thing here, and I think staff does as well. So, does that cover the 5 items? And I've got public process, environmental services council outreach assist, planning of projects, and the history of where we've been, the appeal issues, and the credits for shorthand. Am I missing anything, council, from the lengthy discussion we've had on this? All right.
I guess I would just like to add, if we could, just a commitment to get, the items that we need to take care of within that 10-year period as part of this package, to try to get as much of a written commitment as we can to actually address what we know are to be existing problems during that 10-year period.
And I think part of that, Mr. Duncan, which you raised, I mean, we are not going to be able to hit every item all at the same time. We don't have the staffing, nor do I'm not going to verge to guess on the engineering of whether it's feasible or not. One of the concerns that I've raised before is how you sequence these could have various effects on downstream. And I've asked staff to be very upfront and sensitive about it. So if you're fixing a problem, you're not making something temporarily worse, or at least letting everybody know that it may get worse. So, and again, I'm not saying that those issues exist or not, but given how complicated some of this could be, the sequencing also becomes very important because of downstream effects. So we just need to be mindful of that. But this is going to be a situation, I have mentioned it to staff, it's not going to be where you're doing an enterprise fund, for example, as has been proposed in the past with trash, where you see the trash picked up or collection getting better. It's literally under the ground stuff, and it's going to take, you may get an improvement and nothing happens for a while, and you get a major storm that's the 100-year storm which we're not planning for, and you get flooded, and you're like, what's happening? So, we need to educate the public about that. That's what stormwater is about, and we just need to talk about it and let people know what's happening. It's some of the impacts are going to be immediate, others are not, and even if we do the improvements, they're not going to guarantee against flooding. It's just what this process is all about. Mr. Kalin.
Thank you. Dave Tarter. Dave, would you like to see an accelerated program? Yes. Well, I would support that.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I would like staff at least to look at it. It doesn't have to be.
I mean, with the necessary funding and so forth
Yes.
to do it. Yeah, I would support
Well, I mean,
that.
I tell you, it may be that the funding doesn't have to be significantly more if it's bonded and basically amortized over a period of 10 years.
Staffing issue as well.
Well, it can be, but there's construction management. I mean, it doesn't have to be done in-house. I mean, projects are regularly done with outside construction management in the construction field. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be all homegrown in-house. There may be some reasons why that's preferred. I'd be happy to hear this if we want to discuss it at this point. But construction is regularly supervised by folks outside of staff of any organization.
Here's what I'm going to propose on that front. I think that we had a bit of that discussion about the scale of the projects, where we were headed, and we specifically asked staff to reduce some of the work. So I'm happy to revisit that if that's where this council wants to go, but perhaps council members who want to see a more accelerated process offline can have a discussion with staff and look at those issues before it comes back, and I'm happy to put it back on the calendar if council members wish to, but for council members who want to see a more robust program, that they have a discussion with staff, costs, and if they still would like it to come back, I'm happy to calendar it, but I don't want to retread issues that I think that we've gotten past.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to sit in on a meeting and listen to that discussion. I think Mr. Tarter raises an interesting point, and I mean, your use of the trash analogy is really very vivid and good, I think. You know, we got trash. We now have a method for taking it away. You know, this is a different kind of trash, and, you know, if it's going to take us 10 years to take some of it away, then people just need to know that. Or we need to have some way to do it more quickly, or on some timetable that, as you've very eloquently said, is transparently clear to the public.
Right. On to the next item. So I think we've sort of got a way ahead. This is quasi-ready, I think, for some action, dare I say, on a week from Wednesday. But I think we're going to have to be a little bit fluid based on what staff comes back with. It sounds like they need to take a look at some of the other processes, and I'm sure Mr. Shields will work with me in figuring out the calendar. So I asked for council's indulgence about whether this is going to go forward or not, as we're thinking right now, which is the 27th.
And one other action that the council will have to take, along with adopting by resolution the policy on credits, is a resolution that actually sets the fee. So this is the ordinance that lays out the administration and all of our policies and procedures, but the actual fee would be a separate action by another resolution. It may be possible that we have the credit discussion with the fee discussion, so that those two happen at the same time. I'll need to talk with Bill about that, but you know, that might be one way to consolidate those two actions.
And the sense that I get right now also is the public process piece and the outreach piece is going to be key.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's going to be a huge time commitment. And we have, again, limited resources. And I hope council will join me on this. We do need to give some direction, as Mr. Shields wants to take this on by himself. I think he needs to hear from council that it's a lot to do during a budget process, during other projects that, you know, I leave it up to Mr. Shields to manage his staff, but he can always enlist the Economic Services Council, and I'm sure they'll help.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm volunteering them.
Environmental
Services
Yeah,
Council, I'm
and
sorry.
it's the outreach with the religious institutions in
Yes.
particular that I think is really important, and it needs time. And so we'll need help with that.
And I would,
Well, I'm not trying to stretch the process out, but in terms of more hands.
Yes.
And more messengers.
Yes.
I think would be very important.
and I would just say that I think this is, what I've heard so far, this is a reasonable approach. I think for those who want to do more and increase the costs, you may be jeopardizing the whole program in terms of public support. So it's just a consideration as we go forward.
Mr. Callen?
I don't have a dog in that fight. If, whatever you want to do in terms of what meets most of the needs, it's okay with me, as long as we get it going. And I think you have a good point about not wanting to go over stuff that we've done before. When you go to the outreach, I have to be honest with you, I'm thinking about, I expect there will be pushback. Why would anybody say, great idea, I'd love to contribute more to the city's well-being? I would, you know, if it's feasible, if it's okay, it might be interesting to know how many parishioners in that particular church or wherever it is actually live in Falls Church. Because like we have the, I don't know if that's possible or not, but when we had the CDC discussion, it turned out that the immense majority of the beneficiaries of the Child Development Center discussion did not live in Falls Church, and we were picking up a subsidy for them by keeping the rent for that at a very low rate. It might be interesting to know that question if you can tactfully find out, because why would somebody living outside the city possibly support something like that?
I sense that I'm had best be careful treading in this area, but it is, religious institutions are, you know, very important in our community's social service infrastructure in ways that often are not seen. And for instance, at my Falls Church Presbyterian Church, I don't think a very large percentage of people actually live in the city, but they come from many miles away sometimes. But I'm confident that there are things that the church does that don't necessarily even show up on their books that contribute to, you know, the community offset costs that the government otherwise would have to bear. You know, I mean, this is that's why I raised this. We're, you know, it's an elaborate conversation that we don't need to get into tonight, but it is an important one, because if we're going to assess these people a fee, it's going to come out of something that they are doing now.
I'm sorry, I have to respond to that.
If I can just make a comment on this, you know, I hope we don't go down this road of the churches are a part of our community. They do benefit benefits for the city, whether they're tax paying or not tax paying. Let me finish. Is in my view, and again I'm speaking for myself, is not an issue. They are part of the community. So, you know, whether they should be paying a part of the fees associated with stormwater certainly is a topic worth having, but I do think that the outreach is important. It is going to affect their bottom line, if you will, similar to our businesses as well. So I do think that we need to be sensitive and hear them out and let them certainly know what we're envisioning, because it is going to affect them. So, and that's not to prejudge where we come out, but there is an obligation, I think, on our part to say that there is going to be a fee that's going to be associated with a program that we're going to do, and they need to make appropriate planning decisions centered around that. Mr. Campbell.
Again, please don't mischaracterize my position. I'm not saying don't have outreach. You said all the outreach we possibly can to it. What you talk about, Phil, is called a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. Many churches do that around the country. There is no pilot program in Falls Church. The other thing is I've checked, I guess I shouldn't be a barrack lawyer, but I checked to see what kind of legal cases have been brought against the communities that apply, how many have been contested by religious institutions for fees, for utility fees and the like. I couldn't find any legal case. There's a ton of cases regarding property tax, and that's a hotly debated issue. We're not talking about that at all. That's not part of our discussion, is property tax. But I could not find, maybe the attorneys on the council can find it, but I could find no legal cases raised by a religious institution regarding the legality of charging a utility fee. Just for the record, I did check that out.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like staff is going to get back to us, and then I'll talk to Mr. Shields about calendaring as appropriate for the 27th.
Okay.
And certainly we'll inform the rest of the council about it as well.
Yeah, right.
Do council members need a break of any sort? Mr. Pepe, I know what your answer is going to be.
Wow, he doesn't even look.
All right. Let's carry on.
Mr. Mayor, I'll excuse myself with you, so that makes two of us.
Well, I guess we might as well take a formal break then.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break and come back at 9:15?
Oh, we are taking a break?
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Where's everybody going? Okay.
said, we'll retest it, then if it doesn't, we'll have to explain all that. I said, okay, let's retest. Yeah, but I was just accelerate, which might have minus cost to have construction management, like the chairman speaking. For 10 years, to have spread it slower for 10 years.
No, it's not.
Reconstruction management by outside firms. Fixed costs. I would agree, that's
They valued engineered the heck out of that project. There was an overrun. It was, but it wasn't that extent. It might have been like there was no value in that engineering. That's what happens when you do it on the cheap. Yeah, well, I remember walking in the first time. That renovation GM.
afraid to do that in the past.
Sorry, Mr. Church, not to talk to Richard, I'll talk to the Gooch, he'll take care of it.
You almost need to, don't you? Good road trips, man. Take any kind of road trip, even one road trip.
I'm going to Phoenix tomorrow, so I go to book hotel, everything's booked. I'm like, what's going on? I realize it's spring training and there's a bunch of big games.
That's probably it. Is that you, the person with snacks?
Yeah, I can take it back to her.
Alright. Let's get some pizza at some point. It's too good. I'm on ones at
Okay, there we go.
chocolate covered nuts.
Cheese.
Cheese.
Yes, chocolate pizza.
Pizza, right? Alright. We can find room that budget.
Well, let's see, on March 28th, and we talk about the city clerk and council budget.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Okay. Kathy was asking what snacks they wanted to use as possible.
Yeah, definitely good for some pizza. I gotta say, so much better, you know? Actually gets well, maybe so much more pleasant.
Your call.
I'm telling you, I watered it. It's my call, I said pizza. All right? Pizzas.
The vice mayor gave us the charge to be done by 9:30.
So that's what happened. The rules changed.
The Four Seasons. Just had like some boondoggle trip for like 3 days. Stay in like I said, a Ritz or something like that. Okay, well, get some more involved than I expected.
Never mix religion and politics.
Ritz, I really like Ritz.
Violated the two things not to talk about at a dinner party, you know, right there in the same agenda item, religion and politics. Yeah.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started, Mr. Kale?
Okay, we have 3 items before the council. One is the ordinance to adopt the FY14 budget. The second is an ordinance to set the tax rate for the calendar year 2013. And then the last one is the ordinance fixing the capital improvements program. Obviously, last Monday night was a presentation on all of these items. I will not give a long staff report, but I do want to just say this, that between first reading and second reading, the budget ordinance can be changed up or down. The capital budget can be moved up or down between first and second reading. The tax rate can be moved down, but the advertised rate or the rate that's in the first reading, you cannot go above that. So tonight on the agenda is a discussion of the tax rate. There's 2 issues. One, in terms of the ordinance that you'll be asked to vote on for first reading on Wednesday the 27th. And then second, the question of the advertisement. The advertisement needs to be placed tomorrow. My recommendation would be for you all, regardless of what your thoughts are and what you want to vote on Wednesday, is that we let the advertisement of the rate be an administrative decision so that I can go and with Kathy Bushell and with Richard, we can process the advertisement to give you the maximum flexibility. Again, the reason for the $1.41 as the rate that is proposed here in this first reading for your budget ordinance is to take care of 6 cents for the schools, 2 cents for the orphaned items that we've discussed, and then 6 cents to give council flexibility ultimately on the establishment of the water utility. And if you wanted to keep the level of service that we have built into that stormwater utility, but flexibility on the fee, that's what that last 6 cents would be. That's what gets you to the $1.41, and what I believe is it would be, in order to give the council the room to maneuver for this budget, would be the advertised rate. That's my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions on all three of these ordinances before the council.
We're going to do it one at a time?
No, I think they're sort of all interrelated. And again, the key aspects are the budget can move up or down. The CIP can move up or down. The tax levy can only move down. So that's what we're looking at.
That's right.
Say that again real fast.
I'm not going to... At 9:30 without dinner, I'm not going to even try. All right. Councilmember, questions on this or comments? Mr. Kelly?
Just on the 133.
Your mic.
On the 133 that you have there, which takes, that's the 127 plus the 6 cent for the, and I understand what you're saying, it could go up or down. But just to make sure we understand that it does not include the 2 cents.
That is correct.
Okay,
So cable TV is out at $1.33, and the other issues that the school board wanted to work with the council on figuring out ultimately how they'd be funded, Q-Scabs and the use for the school facilities for Rec and Park are not in that $1.33 rate. You would need $1.35 at a minimum to give yourself flexibility for those items.
as long as that is we're clear that those are unspoken for costs, and that also includes no additional tax rate for needed city improvements.
Correct.
That assumes that nothing gets done and we continue to move backwards, maybe less slowly than if there was an actual cut, but we're still moving backwards by keeping that rate, that expenditure flat.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, other council members? Vice Mayor Snyder?
Sure, thanks a lot. I think it's important to keep an eye on what other jurisdictions are doing, so I'd like periodic reports on that as to how we're comparing with other jurisdictions. I think that's useful. I think people will raise that issue repeatedly as we go along. There were a lot of questions raised, I think, on Saturday by our citizens about the reserve policy. I think our chief financial officer gave us a sort of a best practices document from the government
Government Financial Officers Association.
And I appreciate their expertise. I think the taxpayers may sometimes feel that they're better able to determine the use of their money than the government financial officers, but I think it is what it is, and you know, so I think the community is going to need a lot more discussion on that. We're getting comments, and I think they need to be persuaded. I think they've asked a lot of questions about it.
They will have it.
And I think we need to thoroughly analyze that. I think as well, we need to thoroughly analyze the impacts of development, and there is a League of Women Voters sponsored event on Wednesday where we'll be looking at the school population as well as the impacts on development. It's important to keep in mind that at the 133, we are funding a significant increase in the schools and a significant increase for the city. So I think if you did a zero base, the reality is even at 133, everybody knows there's a significant tax increase, but there's also a significant service increase with that. So I think that's useful to keep in mind as well. So those are a couple initial comments.
Other council members? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think the basic service increase is primarily debt service. All right, if you recall, the budget guidance was to grow no larger than the revenue. The revenue grew at slightly over 4%, and the general government grew somewhere around 3.8. So
But I was speaking mostly in terms of the schools, the increased teachers, and those sorts of things to maintain the class size, so.
that's true.
Yeah.
Councilmember Tarter?
Were you recognizing me?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I would say, I think we should consider having a lower rate than the 141, an advertised rate. I mean, is there anyone here that is going to support a 141 rate? And if not, is that you?
For the advertised rate.
But in terms of actually voting on a rate of that? Well, I don't think they're totally separate, and so I suggest we advertise a lower rate than the 141. We also have the Stormwater Enterprise Fund that we've just discussed tonight. You can call it a tax. It currently is a tax. It's part of our general fund right now. But that'll be a separate cost that'll be added on to our tax rate as well, whether it's a fee or whether it's a tax, however you want to characterize it. So I would suggest maybe we try at least considering advertising a lower rate. I would also ask the city manager to take a hard look at the budget and see if there are any possible savings he could suggest maybe in our coming meetings in scouring the budget to see if there are costs that he feels possibly could be reduced. So anyway, thank you.
Other council members? All right. The two questions that I had, and they don't necessarily need to be answered this evening. One is we had previously had some discussions about the date change on our calendar year and how we go about managing that. At some point, we need to get a staff briefing about whether this is something we want to take up this year or not. We don't need to do it this evening, but I just want to make sure that we round out that discussion, because we did talk about doing it during this budget process if we were going to take some action. And then two, on the reserves, I do think that we need to get some type of questions and answers out to the community about this. The schools, have done a very good job about getting information out about how they're doing their budgeting, et cetera. I think we could learn from how they do it, at times very effectively. So I think we need to make sure that the community understands that. But again, the hard work and the sacrifices have been made because we're essentially at our target. And we are going to have a discussion about where that target should be. Richard, when do we have our policy discussions about fund balance, et cetera? That happens later in the year, if I'm not mistaken.
It happens in the fall.
And that's when we look at our entire financial picture and our financial policies. So, again, speaking for myself, I think we've done the work. If we want to revisit the targets, that's a fine discussion to have, but there's a time and place for it, and that's when we're looking at it holistically. We can't pull one lever and not realize what's going on with the other financial policies. So they are routinely, as we've discussed, placed on the calendar for discussion. So I don't think we should shy away from that. My only point is the work's been done. We need to have that discussion. But if we take it out of turn, that has other consequences that we may not be aware of, because we're not going to take the policies up all at the same time. And if we do, then I'm not sure how this council gets through the budget process. And that's why they're divided the way that they are in various tranches. So again, not opposed to retreading that ground, but I don't think the time is to do that on a one-off during the budget cycle. If council members want to do that, I'm happy to entertain that and get it calendared, but there's costs. It's not a free lunch to do that. All right? Anything else? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. So your comments earlier about the public education process on the reserve fund, you would not hold on that until it was discussed later on. You would do that contemporaneous with our discussions on the budget.
Correct.
Okay. I think that would be useful, because I agree that there is, you know, a lot of questions out there, and I think also it'd be helpful just for the public to make sure that they know what fund balance policy document we are talking about. I think the printout that I have, I'm not sure it's the most current one, but anyway, if we just ask staff to make sure that the council's reserve fund policy is posted and clear there for all to see.
And I would note it's in your budget book, and so
right.
That's an easy reference point.
As to Mr. Tartar's point about the level of the tax rate, I mean, I leave it to you all who've done this many times before. I mean, at some point, I assume that a discussion is had where people are told they're not going to get everything that they want. And I fully understand that we need to advertise high. At the same time, if we do that, I'm a bit concerned that we create an expectation that we do not intend to fulfill. But I do defer to leadership and those of you who've been on council longer to know when the appropriate time is to, you know, talk about things, and when the moment comes that, you know, the deals have got to get done.
Other council members? Vice Mayor Snyder?
For comparison purposes, during the financial crisis, what did we have to do to preserve the city? What was the tax rate increase?
For the fiscal year 2011, the council adopted a tax rate increase of 17 cents.
Okay, so in perspective, that was the largest tax rate increase, I think, in a long, long time in anyone's memory. And this year, we're very close to that without a financial crisis. So there's quite, and I'm very sympathetic with what David Tartar is saying. I don't like this tax rate at the current level. I think we're going to be, we may have run up against the invisible wall that exists as to how much people are willing to pay. But until we work with this budget and we find reasonable things to bring the tax rate down below the 141, including the fund for water, but in addition, I'm concerned about people now have the sense, oh, we've got this money, now we're going to figure out new ways to spend it. And I don't want that to happen either. I mean, Councilmember Duncan said exactly the right thing, which is we're going to advertise an extremely high tax rate, almost an historically high tax rate increase. But at the same time, we're going to have to be convincing people that don't come in with more. A lot of those things on the wish list are not going to be funded this year. At the same time, we're being responsible and we're fully supporting the schools and fully supporting basic services. So it's going to be a very difficult tightrope to walk. I think at this point, unless I can do the budget chopping right now, that I guess I support the higher rate, but I don't want to end up there. I guess that's my basic view.
Why don't I try to move this along, or else we're going to go in circles all evening. I think if I can try to speak for the council members that are here, and you all can weigh in if you feel otherwise, is that there's grave concern about the 141. I think we can all agree to that. The issue before us is, before being presented with the budget, what are we administratively prepared to allow Mr. Shields to do? And again, I do think it's an administrative call at this juncture until it comes to us at the next reading. So I think that's sort of the message, is I think we do need to give the manager some leeway on this administrative function, and then it will come to us numerous times before it's finally adopted. So there'll be a lot of movement on this budget. I think what I'm hearing the council say is, you know, because it's getting advertised at a certain rate, not likely to where we're going to end up without prejudging it. That there needs to be a lot of community discussion and work that happens between now and April 22nd, if I've got the date right, or right about that time period. So I think that's, I hope that I can speak for the council on that, that's the takeaway. Is that right? Please.
I mean, I guess I would respectfully disagree. I mean, I think that this is not just an administrative function, but, you know, in city council, we need to show guidance and leadership. And to me, we're not doing that at this point. I think we need to start narrowing the tunnel and getting down to where we may end up being. But I think we're really not starting that process by allowing the advertisement of a budget and a tax rate that I think most of us, if maybe not all of us, feel is excessive.
Mr. Tartar, you've got the floor, so if there's a number that you propose in a way of getting there without us seeing the budget, I think we're all ears.
Well, I mean, I tell you, I would certainly open if there's more than just me who's interested in doing this to try to come up with a number. If I'm the only one, I don't know if there's much point in that.
The leadership, and we're all equals here around this table. So, you know, I made what I thought was the consensus point, and if you have a different view of where we need to be heading with the advertised rate, let's have that discussion.
Well, I'm trying to have that discussion. That's why I raised the point. I mean, I tell you, I don't know if there needs to be a number given if there's no consensus to actually, well, no, I mean, in terms of a lower rate. Is there a consensus for anyone on this board to do a lower number? And if the answer is no, then I guess there's no need for me to continue.
Let me put it this way. There's a real desire to get to a lower number by the end of this process. That's where I am. But honestly, tonight, I'm looking at school needs, I'm looking at the city budget, and I'm looking at unfunded things in the middle that we're clearly going to fund, for example, the Falls Church City TV. So I'm not prepared tonight to say that what that lower number is. I will work very, very hard to get there.
Mr. Pepe, I believe that you had a comment.
Well, I was just going to agree with what you said and what Mr. Snyder said. While I think we're all striving to get in that direction, we just, we don't have the information we need to know how to make intelligent chops, because you have to head down that road, and we haven't heard from everybody yet on this. And secondly, one way to really make sure folks come out of the woodworks and say whether they like it or not is you advertise it high, and they will come out and we will hear it, and that's the point. We're supposed to listen. That's why we're supposed to be fair about putting it out there. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we are at this stage of the process, as much as I fully understand that it's not our money, it's money we take from everybody.
Other council members?
I hear what...
Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying. On the other side, it is important for the mayor's message to get through, I think, which is there really isn't anybody sitting here tonight or absent who plans to vote for 141. So if folks pick up the newspaper in the morning or read it online and hear 141, oh, okay, we're all right. That's not the message. You know, you're going to hear from people who are concerned about taxes. You may not hear from people who are concerned that their priorities aren't funded, because they might think they're going to be funded. But no one here expects that everyone's wish list will be answered. And so, given that we're heading into spring break, you know, the schools community is going to be taken off. I'm a little sensitive to the timing. You know, next week we're going to be meeting and talking about this in more detail. We just need to send, I think, the mayor's message, which is that, you know, not everything that everyone has asked for is going to be given to or provided for, although apparently we are going to advertise at 141.
And if I can just make one clarifying point, that's just not the mayor's message. I hope that it's the council's
The way you summed up the message.
Thank you. All right. Unless there's anything else, I think that concludes the items on the agenda. I had talked to Mr. Shields. I'm sorry, the bond discussion. Sorry, I thought we had taken that up somehow, but but it wasn't my promise. It was Councilmember Snyder that promised we'd be out of here by 9:30, right?
Yep. Getting close.
Oh, okay. The reimbursement.
We're on the bond item.
Richard is always fast in these things.
All right. In anticipation of the next bond issue, we have projects that are already underway. We've already begun spending money on them. This resolution allows you to reimburse yourself for up to 18 months after the date of this resolution, as soon as the bonds are issued. We have not yet determined the amount nor the timing of the issue, but we do know that some of the projects are underway. So we would like to make provision so that once we issue the bonds, we can recover the money that we're laying out now.
Mr. Cameron?
I think that's fine. Just two quick points. So basically, we're giving an advance on an expected debt issuance. Now, that advance comes from our general fund, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Comes from a general fund which has to have the resources available in order to advance the funding. Anyway, you don't have to answer that. That was
Thank you.
That was rhetorical. The other thing is when we do just to keep in mind, when we do the actual debt issuance, if there is a premium for having a callable or putting a put on the bond where we can refinance if rates so determine, how much extra are we paying, would we have to pay for that as opposed to going through the Virginia system where we're locked in, there's no chance of debt restructuring or refinancing if we wanted to?
We weren't contemplating going through the Virginia system.
Other council members?
Does this action have any impact on this year's budget?
Yes. Yes,
So-
there will be items in.
Not the FY14 budget, but
The
the
FY13.
the year we're in right now.
Okay, so nothing we're doing here is adding to the need for tax revenue for 2014?
No, this is already in your CIP. It's already been planned for. The debt service is budgeted. All we're doing is we're delaying doing the actual bond issue, but we're still incurring expenditures. So we want to be able to reimburse ourselves. There's no extra cost.
And to put a finer point on it, the debt service for these is budgeted in FY13. When we talk about increasing the debt service in FY14, it's not for these projects, as these are already baked in.
Okay, I thought that was important to get that clarification.
Other council members? Thanks. I think that takes us through the items that are on the agenda. I had asked Mr. Shields and also our city attorney, John Foster, to take a look at some of the zoning issues dealing with Van Buren. I believe that they're actively looking at those issues, but in the interim, if they wanted to make any comments, happy to have them let council know where we're at in the process. And I don't think we're looking at answers this evening, but if you all can just let us know what's happening in the review.
I would just say that for everyone who has written in, and we've gotten a dozen or so emails in on the on this issue, every one of them will get an individual response, and we're working on that response. And I think that's the main thing that we wanted to communicate is that that everyone who's communicated with that deserves a response, and we'll get one to them.
I'd just like to add, I'd looked at the emails that you all had received. There are obviously some serious concerns that have been raised by the folks emailing you, and so I want to give those concerns the time they deserve. And so I'm looking into it, and once I've completed my review, I expect to be able to do that by the middle of this week. I'll report out to you all on council, and then we can talk about next steps.
Just one quick follow-up question. Because a lot of the citizens' complaints alleged non-compliance with the law, it's very important that those be addressed in particular. And do you feel that your independence is any way impaired?
No, I'm approaching this issue like I approach any legal issue in the city, and that is I look at whether particular action that has been taken is in compliance with the law or it's not. You know, I don't really have any dog in the fight other than to make sure that actions have been taken in compliance with applicable Virginia law.
Other council members? That takes us through the agenda items. Anything on the calendar, council members? Anybody going to be out coming up?
I'm out on travel, several parts of several meetings or meetings in April, but I'll definitely be here on the 22nd for the final action. And
the 22nd of April?
Yeah, whenever that final action is. And also, I've gotten some parking enforcement questions and issues that I want to work with the city manager on in several parts of the city.
Anything else by other council members? All right, if I can get a motion, and council members, we are meeting this Thursday, the 21st, for a budget work session.
Where's that? Here?
Yes. Ms. Shields, do we know what items we're covering on that work session?
So
we would cover the theme would be community services. So we would cover recreation and parks, the library budget, housing and human services, and the registrar on Thursday night.
Shields, or can you send out a note to that effect?
Yes.
So we've got one council member who's not here.
Okay. All right.
All right, anything else? All right, if I can get a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Second.
That's Mr. Kalen and Mr. Snyder. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.